a journey of 5 years now. We sort of perhaps made every mistake in the playbook as well along the way, and that was the journey. And that was the journey of learning as well. So we started out with creating, TVCs and doing mass media because we thought maybe awareness is the way to go, and telling people it's such a huge problem, the country doesn't seem to be aware of it, let's tell people about it. But we realized very quickly that, and this was something that happened during COVID, right now 123 million girls are expected to drop out of school during puberty. But during COVID, the number was predicted to go up to 33 million. Now that's a huge jump, and we suddenly realized that what we'd been doing up until now wouldn't work anymore, because advertising didn't have to just talk about a problem, it had to be the solution in itself. At some point, we stopped being an advertising agency about this. We have engaged with people in think tanks, policymakers, with change makers, with the government, and the government of so many states as well. So when you want to drive change, you can't box yourself in, this is what an agency can do. You'll have to look at what can we do to drive that change and do what needs to be done. So if you need to get the right partners on board, we need to, go on ground. Change doesn't always happen on TVC. What's really interesting about this particular, brief from the start was it was never one target audience. We were talking to our consumers. We were talking to policymakers, we were talking to NGOs, we were talking to the young girl who needed to be educated about, periods. So it was always meant to talk to all of these audiences together at various different levels. So if we did the wall art, which educated the girl about periods and, created awareness in her peers and her surroundings, we were also doing a petition which had over 1 million signatures, which was to the government. It was directed at the government. So it worked at many different levels. It wasn't as singular as this is our audience and this is what, because change has to percolate through many, many layers. In fact, over the last year, with the data that we had, we could already see that 1 million more girls had stayed on in school. So there was a very, very strong measurable change. But to be honest, campaigns like these, it's not very easy to measure. And it's not an immediate change. Sometimes it's actually generational change that, we predict will happen. What we are seeing right now is a very, very radical change in period biology. It's no longer about the society and culture alone, but it's also period biology that's changing, and it's reflected around the world. What a 13-year-old can comprehend is not what an 8-year-old can comprehend. So the way you have to teach them will be different. So it changes everything. It is a new conversation. So there is not a whole lot of data out there. There is not one specific reason that causes it, but about 10 at least. It is evolution. It is COVID has, accelerated the rate of change. It is stress. It is lifestyle. It is food. It's hormones in our food. So there are many, many parameters. I don't think the scientific community also is pinning them down to one. There is just too many. What I have read in research papers is that it was stress induced by COVID. It was lack of children being children, going out, playing, doing all of those things. So there has been an impact. But like I said, you can't pin it down to one thing. It's a cluster of, factors. I think we have to go where the problem is, and that's been the nature of this campaign from the start. And if this is something, and it's such a big issue, then that needs tackling now, because otherwise it will only accelerate the problem that we've been trying to solve. It's definitely created a lot of conversation in the country. In fact, probably the most we've seen so far, because this is important to everyone. And it's a new conversation that no one's ever addressed. So everyone's coming out. Educators are coming and saying, oh, we've seen these signs in our classrooms. There are parents coming and saying, we never knew we had to prepare our child so early. It has the power to disrupt a lot of systems that have been put into place, not just, as per what we've done, but what the NGOs are doing, what the government is doing, all of that. Because if you've geared your, to teach 11, 12, grades 6, 7, and 8, but the girl's going to drop out in grade 3, then you've got to plan for that, and you've got to change things. And you've got to think about how do you explain complex biology to an 8-year-old whose level of comprehension is going to be different. 70% of India lives in rural areas, and it's a huge population in our country. It's 1.4 billion, right? So yes, it's largely rural, but there's a lot of us in rural areas. That said, 28% of our rural audience uses a hygienic sanitary protection, right? So there is a vast need for education. And some of these issues don't necessarily confine themselves only to rural areas. They actually percolate. They percolate through different geographies as well. Even despite doing a lot of educational measures for the daughters, we found a lot of resistance in breaking the taboos. And the reason for that is when it comes to, textbook knowledge, and especially on a sensitive subject like this, and then there's your mother's word, right? The mother's word will trump any textbook any day. So it was really important for us to create an ally in the mother, which meant we had to educate the mother to be able to make her an ally. I think we could never have come this far without partnerships, and that's been a very, very valuable part, a very important, crucial part of this campaign. So be it UNICEF, which was working with educators, creating the change in curriculum, also engaging with the governments. The new curriculum was taken from one state to the next. Every 28 states, there was a presentation made. There was engagement with their think tanks to incorporate it as part of, every state's curriculum. Media played a huge role because agencies don't have that access to the government as media does, but media can engage with them. So we used media in a big way, not just for publicity, not just to put on the front pages of the newspaper or show in the news, but also to engage, to bring them to the table for discussions. I think it's taught me and taught my teams that sometimes we don't have to confine ourselves to what we know best. And that's how we started, right? We started with doing TVCs and doing mass media because that's what we do all the time. And that's how we, respond to briefs. But it's taught us in this journey that we don't have to hold ourselves into that box anymore. And that agencies are providers of solutions, and they can come in all forms and means and ways.